proper loose women set this, isn't it?
Sorry, you've got Joe's chuckle before we introduced ourselves. Hello and welcome to Raspberry Tea Pod Chat. We have a very, very special guest today. We have a gentleman with us called Russell Thompson, or Russ for short, who is, well, I'll let you explain actually.
Petrified by the looks of him.
Yeah, he's slightly concerned about what he's got himself into. Russ, when he talked to us about coming on the podcast, he said, I'll be the straight one. And so I'm determined we're going to corrupt him during this podcast.
What did you say about releasing him unaffected?
We'll try and let him go home unaffected by us, but we'll see what happens.
Sounds good.
So, Russ, would you like to tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Thanks for having me on. I'm Russell Thompson. I'm a business consultant, which is, I don't know, I guess people often ask me what does a business consultant do, and really I suppose what I'm trying to do is inspire kind of business owners to reach the vision, achieve their vision, and create better working lifestyles or better working lives and better personal lives for them and their employees. That's the kind of, I guess, the high level vision of what I do. And I do that through a series of very dull and very boring things like planning and spreadsheets and kind of project plans and things like that. It's all quite dull, but it is the foundation of a kind of solid business. It's all that kind of stuff whereby kind of creative people are really, it's the stuff that you don't want to do.
Exactly, and I can vouch for that. I've had a couple of sessions with Russ and he makes me think strategically, and I don't do that naturally. Yeah, and I certainly don't write plans down naturally. And I've got to admit, I've still not written it down. But anyway, I will do it, I promise.
Well,
I will do it. I've got to send it to you. I know. Anyway, yes. So, a bit about you personally, Russ, because we try and sort of keep this quite informal and chat-like. So, we know you're Russ Thompson, we know you're a business consultant, but who is Russ Thompson?
Wow, yeah, there's a story, or three. I'm 48, 47, I am 47.
Oh, it's a baby.
Does that mean there's a birthday coming to?
No, December, so 47, yeah.
December.
Yeah.
I'm surrounded by December babies.
Yeah.
Well, Sagittarians.
Oh. This one's just on the cusp of Capricorn.
Anyway,
I'm a fish, so I'm a bit of all of you. So
there you go. We digress. We
do, as always.
Don't worry,
Which I said I've got to affect him.
December birthday, yes.
December's my birthday. I've got two lads, Jack and Luke. Jack's 22, Luke's 14, coming up 15, coming up 38. And I'm not married, but my partner is Anne. We've been together since 2001. She was also my first girlfriend that I ever had at school. Which was not in 2001, I might add. That was a long time before that. But we both kind of went away, had lives of their own, and then came back and got back together.
That's a nice rounded story.
And she's a business owner as well?
Yeah, she's kind of self-employed hairdresser. She's kind of worked in different salons across Sheffield mainly, but she works from home now on mobile. She's done a bit in Sheffield College, kind of training the juniors and things like that as well. So we're both one man woman bands, whatever you want to call us.
So that fits in perfectly and leads us in perfectly to today's pod chat, because what we wanted to talk about is how men and women make different business decisions, or whether they do. Does it go on personality type? Does gender have any influence in it at all? Is it on experience? What makes us make the decisions we make? Claire?
Oh, over to me. Well, on an earlier episode, we talked about the magpie syndrome.
We did. Puppy dog. Claire's puppy dog.
The chimp. Emotional, if you like. I think I'm a bit of a... Well, not a strange one, what have you? Well, we're all
you are very
strange. Very
strange,
strange, depending what day it is. I think a lot of my decisions naturally are emotional, but I'm also very logical and technical. So I probably think more masculine than feminine, because I'm very technical and structured and like. But then I think emotionally on the other hand, so it's kind of a bit of a,
And I'd see you as completely emotional.
there you go.
I'd see her as completely random.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true as well.
So yeah, but I think I'm definitely emotionally led.
You see, Joe and I have come from very corporate backgrounds. Both very male driven as well at the top.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't fit in.
Why was that?
One female who was the next level up from me actually once said to me, Claire, if you want to be taken seriously in this organisation, you're going to have to dye your hair boring brown and start wearing trouser suits.
Never going to happen. A bit like I will never wear a skirt.
And I just went, then I won't be taken seriously. And that was the day I actually realised I needed to get out.
Yeah.
You think there's part of that though that comes with, so there kind of used to be a saying, didn't there? It's like a man's world and things like that, and that was the anticipated norm of a particular kind of time of life, if you like, where men were seen as these captains of industry that kind of ran things in kind of grey suits, kind of pinstripe and all that kind of stuff. And that actually, although I would say that has been changing for quite some time, that's a big kind of wheel to turn, if you like, because it's
And
kind
it's
of
nowhere
mired
near
industry.
there yet.
No.
Yeah.
And so I guess a lot of kind of people, a lot of ladies, a lot of men would kind of have that kind of thinking that you've got to have that kind of that veneer, that corporate veneer, to be able to kind of move forward.
I think, yeah, I mean, I was one of those people that when you got to the high level committees, I'd say something and nobody'd respond. And then somebody, a man, would say it in slightly different words but say exactly the same thing and everybody responded.
Yeah.
And I felt completely invisible. But I don't know whether it was just literally face didn't fit. I don't know whether it was my communication style wasn't right or whatever. So I've experienced both. I've experienced the big corporate that literally was an old boys club at the top. And then I've experienced being self-employed for the last 10 years and I know exactly where I am and where I want to be. You've had the same, haven't you, Jo?
So I was in corporate finance for just under 20 years. And some of the roles that I've had have been quite high profile. So I was complaints manager for the business for 6 years. I used to have to stand in a boardroom and present to 12 males. Towards the sort of latter end of my corporate finance world, I was an auditor. Again, in a male dominated environment because there was agricultural equipment, there was heavy goods vehicles, there was the motor industry, and I used to have to audit all of it. And I used to just get stared at sometimes. I'm blessed in some ways in my stature.
She's got big boobs.
That's my dolly bit, isn't it?
They can see.
Oh yeah, they can, yeah. And you just knew whether it was right or wrong that people were staring. And you just knew that, and I don't think it was me taking it personally, it physically happened one day when I went onto one of the agricultural sites and every person that was in that workshop suddenly appeared at the doorway.
That was your Dolly Parton, like.
And that didn't have it on that day, funnily enough. But that's horrific, isn't it? And that actually knocked my confidence massively. I could stand in front of the around the board table and present, and that was absolutely fine. Because I used to put my emotion, that's getting back to the point, I used to put my emotion behind everything that I did. And people actually kind of followed me and listened to me because I was so, I wouldn't burst into tears or anything like that. I wasn't on that level of emotion, but certainly the passion behind what I was doing was there. Yeah. And so they trusted my judgment.
That's something you don't hear of every day, isn't it?
No, because I was actually passionate for each of those individual businesses that I audited as well.
So Claire, coming from the sort of digital world and having been both your own boss and an employee, have you seen the difference in male-female roles high up?
I think women in the higher up roles in organisations in the private sector seem to have to work a lot harder to be taken seriously, or maybe become a harder version of themselves.
Do you know, I think that's a really, really good point, because I think you lose yourself as a woman in
business.
In business.
Maybe in the bigger organisations, like I've worked within the NHS, that not so much. I think it's like I said, public or private sector. I've worked in like Coors Brewers, and I've worked in engineering sector and construction sector, so you don't find as many women high up in those industries, although one of my experiences with one of my main clients, it was female led. And I think, like I say, it seems like the softer skills that you normally associate with women get hidden more. So maybe you have to, it's perceived that you have to put on a persona to be a female C-level person.
It's interesting, isn't it?
I've obviously worked a long time in corporate, and actually when I first went in there in the late 80s, I would have said it was predominantly kind of first line managers, team leaders, supervisors that were women, and they kind of got to a certain level, and then it were kind of a very kind of male dominated hierarchy with a very, very few kind of senior leaders, board members, and actually probably more non-executive board members that were women, rather than rather than kind of a normal traditional board member or a kind of normal C-suite kind of leader. What I would say is I actually did work for some women kind of through the kind of late 90s, early 90s, if you like, who were really, really dominating characters, but didn't lose anything from the femininity by being like that. They were kind of very much kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Very kind of dominant, actually. In some cases, I'm kind of a young lad at the time. I were absolutely crapping it off. Some of these kind of.
Is that why you're calling it the noughties?
That's why I'm shivering like a wreck here right now. But
we're very dominant in our businesses, aren't we?
And they weren't really intimidating people, but they were really confident in their ability. What I would definitely say. But you kind of spoke with them out of work, and that kind of same kind of confidence it did exude, but I wouldn't say it kind of took anything away from the femininity or anything. I would say that they were still very, very kind of I say attractive, but I don't mean attractive as in looking, but attractive, great conversationalists, great people to kind of spend some time with and have a beer with, great people to learn from. There were nothing in that. The point you made earlier about kind of where your opinion might not have counted. I've experienced that, but not in a kind of man-woman situation. So kind of the industries that I've worked in a lot of them have been kind of, supported by big consultancies. So the big players, the McKinseys, the PwCs and places like that. And what I did find that as an employee of a company, I could say something, and that was almost like, okay, thanks for your contribution. Someone else come and said it, we're on 1,200, 1,400, 1,600 quid a day, and that was immediately validated as a worthwhile opinion listening to, because it came with the price tag that my opinion didn't come with. And I didn't necessarily see that wasn't from a man-woman point of view, because actually in the consultancies that I work with, the split was more even in terms of men versus women, but it with that perception of, bloody hell, we bought this for mega bucks, we better kind of value that. And then what you see in a lot of those industries as well is they kind of downsize, they offshore, they let a lot of people with a lot of experience go, and then 2 years later they kind of fetching all those people back as consultants because they actually realise that they haven't got the bedrock of intellectual property and knowledge. That's kind of happened with me 3 or 4 times, whereby I've gone back into a couple of companies, but really gone back in because of what I learned kind of in the late 80s, 90s, early 90s, that had gone. Because what happens a lot, I feel, is that because of kind of aggressive systemization, I might call it, people get they don't get induction training you used to get back in the day, go into a room for 2 weeks and learn how to do the job. What you do is you get very light touch kind of introduction to that business, and you get a standard operating procedure. So you know that to make that process work, you've got to hit A, and then you've got to hit B, and then you've got to hit C. You haven't got a clue why. And if your C button's stuck down, you have got no idea what to do. So off topic, I guess, but I think it's relevant because it kind of plays back into that perception of different roles.
So now, do you think it's a perception then? Sorry, Claire. Do you think it's just a perception?
yeah, let's come back to that in a second, because I
Okay.
think now being self-employed
Mhm.
and your wife being self-employed,
Mhm.
what do you think of each other's business decisions? Or do you work together on them?
We kind of do, but not by design.
Okay.
It's more of a kind of default position, because I know she's got me back. I trust her with
Yeah.
anything. And so, like for today, just as an example, I like to think I can write, not the kind of writing that you do, but I like to think I can write a coherent sentence that holds together. I won't send it before I've kind of bounced it off her. So I'll talk to her about that. She'll, as a very different business to
Absolutely.
mine, and really around the type of things that she actually does in the job. You know, I can't do anything about like that at all, but certainly there to kind of help with the decision making. But what I would say about Anne is she's a really creative person, turns around to anything. In fact, I've left her actually, you know, she's basically rebuilding our drive on her own.
Well done, Anne.
She put his kitchen in at his other house virtually on her own, and I'm stood there just holding bits
Love
and making
it.
cups of tea. She's really kind of creative, but she's also really practical in her decision making as well. So, you know, when she worked in salons, she'd have been making sure that the stock were done, making sure that, you know, all that kind of stuff were right as well.
Yeah.
So we've got quite a real good thing going, because I know that, you know, whereas if we have a conversation about something, the subject matter itself might not apply to either of us, or we might not have a great insight into either of us, but the process and the practicality behind it will be able to lend each other something from that.
Yeah.
So thinking about your now as a consultant, independent consultant, thinking about the people you're working with,
Yeah.
do you see a difference in male-female decision making, or is it more on personality? Because I know a few of your clients, and I know that certainly they're not all logical,
That's what
thought out
we're aiming for.
thinkers. But do you see a difference, male-female?
I'm not sure I do. I'm not sure I do really. I think I would say that I've got kind of clients that kind of are creative thinkers and really don't kind of have a lot of organisational stuff, and that's absolutely why they've brought me in. I would say I've got clients who are very kind of considered in the planning and the thinking and the thought process, but actually they need more of a validation, they need more of someone to kind of bounce off. Yeah. And I don't think the fact that is me as a man or me as a consultant, I don't think that makes any difference to them. From the discussions that I've had with clients, and there have been men, women, in both in kind of both my corporate consulting and my smaller business consulting, I'm not sure I do see that difference now. I think maybe a few years ago I might have said differently. Yeah. Obviously I'm older now as well, so you then have a different view of kind of where decisions are being driven from.
The reason I'm asking is because when I first went self-employed, I met somebody who ran female boardrooms, for want of a better word. So they were for women who are either a business owner or a business partner or director.
Yeah.
And but they didn't have a board.
Yeah.
And so what we used to do is meet once a month, and it'd be one person, we used to call it, I think, a spotlight or something, and they would come and say, this is an issue I've got at the moment, and we would all work through it with them.
Yeah.
And it was always marketed to us as men don't work in the same way as women.
Right.
Men don't think in the same way as women. Therefore, if there were men in the room, the people giving their issue, talking about their issue, wouldn't be able to say what they wanted to say.
Right.
They wouldn't be able to show any emotion, and very often women will, if something's going wrong at work, they'll get emotional, etc. And I just accepted that. I then went to a mixed one.
Yeah.
And this was slightly different. They were all managing directors or business owners. And again, it was a very similar formula, as in there was one person chosen to give a spotlight, but it was a what's bothering you, let's put them on a flip chart, which one does everybody want to tackle? It was that, so it wasn't an organised one. The guys in that room cried. The guys in that room showed just as much vulnerability as any woman I've ever seen in that circumstance.
Yeah.
And that really opened my eyes. And I thought, there isn't a difference.
I kind of agree with you. I think maybe the kind of positioning is a legacy of a different time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that,
kind
I
of
agree with that.
not talking about, you know, through the annals of history kind of
Yeah.
thing, but I suppose, yeah, I am in kind of a way, because that dominant male role has been something that's been there since time, you know, since
Yeah.
time began.
Yeah.
And I suppose when you look at the kind of grand scheme of things, that kind of turning that wheel, like I talked about earlier, there's actually more progress being made in turning that wheel in this amount of history than there has been made in that amount of history. So I guess that
was narrow hands to wide hands for those that you were listening.
But no, cardboard box.
it were actually, weren't it? Yeah. But yeah, you know, I think that's it. And I also think that then I believe in building teams that, you know, you don't build a team in your own image, in my opinion. I think you kind of need to bring a different set of skill sets to the table, and conversation should be out on the table, and you kind of have that conversation, but everybody brings and everybody
We
contributes.
need a pro with Tigger and Eeyore in every organisation.
We do.
I like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And a Christopher Robin.
Maybe not a piglet, but anyway, different matter.
And so maybe them kind of those groups that were all women at the time, or all men, actually. And I know that those groups still exist. I kind of talked to a few of them myself, but I think that they kind of benefit now from the passage of time, from a lot of things that have happened kind of above the fold, if you like, in the past 25 years, that would have been below the fold in the previous 25 years. So that gives people a different perspective, and so I think then it's less of a polarising female-male kind of conversation, where for me the conversation's about capability. You know, it doesn't really matter to me whether you're black, white, green, yellow, you know, male, female, kind of identify as a pixie or whatever it is you want to do. As long as you've got the capability to do the job, then you've got some value.
Yeah, pixie.
No, I agree.
Yeah, I think that makes more sense. I think it's become more
Individual.
yeah. I think this maybe still exists in some bigger organisations where it's harder to effect change, or the tradition carries on.
And for me as well, it was the difference between what's classed as a professional services member of staff and a senior academic.
Yes.
So, you know, there were other factors as well as male and female in play. Yeah.
And I think that's an important point to take as well, because you're right. There will be certain industries, there will be certain companies where change is very much hard to effect, whatever that change might be.
Yeah.
Whether that, you know, it could be anything within there. But also, notwithstanding that, there will be kind of there will be industries, there will be companies that have their own personality as well. So that kind of the way that you would affect change in industry A versus industry B versus industry X will be completely different. And that then it's finding the right methodology. So what I do a lot with the clients that I work with is it's not template based. Kind of go in and we have a conversation about what is the situation that we're in this business. Let's kind of build a bespoke approach to that. And for me, that would be the same sort of thing with anything. If you're going to affect change in the right way, there's no point building your model based on what's happening over there. You need to do what's based on what's happening over here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that we've just actually recorded a podcast which you'll have listened to if you've listened to them in order, on communication styles and the fact that you have to treat each client as an individual, and you can't just send out the exact same words in exact same style or message to everybody.
And the point you made there about kind of you went to some of these other groups and some of the blokes were in tears. You know, you might, you know, to slightly go against what I just said, but not really, is, you know, the people are different. So because the stereotype or the tradition for a person that works in a industry is to be like that, doesn't mean that everybody in that industry works like that.
Absolutely.
So if you're doing the same work with, I don't know, 3 electricians or 3 builders or 3 whatever it might be, you know, you're still gonna get 3 different approaches to whatever, because the personality and the roles will kind of combine to create a unique set of circumstances.
So, do men and women make decisions differently?
I think I'm more inclined to not think it's a male or a female decision, but it's more of is it an emotive or is it a logical decision? So it doesn't, because you can have very strict logical women and men, and you can have emotive men and women, or whether it, like I said, is an emotional or a logical or maybe a business decision if we're on the business subject. And I don't think it matters what your gender is.
I've always been an emotional decision maker to the point that I actually had to, well, I didn't have to, I took up some mentoring again when I was in corporate finance on taking the emotion out of my decisions.
Okay. So Matt, so do you think there's a difference between men and women?
I always thought there was, but I am wondering if things are changing now. You know, I was thinking then as you were talking, are men actually starting to show more of their emotions in their thinking?
Yeah, I think so.
Absolutely.
And is it now more accepted and acceptable that men are just themselves?
Do you know what? Having a 19-year-old male in the house, I can honestly say that by the time he gets into his 30s and 40s and becomes head of whatever or higher up in an organisation or whatever, I think it'll be a totally different ballgame. I think everybody will be on a level playing field.
It's certainly
I
got that
honestly
direction,
do.
I think.
I mean, my thought right now is it depends on the organisation, because if you do have that very old old school, into that's what
Old school, old boys network.
If the organisation's been that, the women that I've seen going into that successfully mould themselves into that, and so aren't really themselves anymore. And I think that's a massive shame. I don't think anybody should have to change themselves for their job. I think they're in the wrong job if you've got to change yourself for your job.
True.
I think if you've got to pretend you're somebody you're not every day, that has a massive effect on your life.
Oh God, it's just going to change it completely.
Yeah.
It can only last so long.
Yeah,
it's just not sustainable,
but
is
that's
it?
kind of evolution, right?
Yeah,
To
absolutely.
a certain degree, because my take on it would be is that you are, whoever you are the sum of the experiences that you've been through in your life, and that will make that will kind of inform your decision making process.
Yeah.
And if you've come from a time where women were far more marginalised and weren't given the opportunities, then I think that is a part of your decision making process. I think there was probably something genetically with ladies and men anyway that kind of, so that kind of complete building block, if you like, of the sum of your experiences will focus your decision. Whereas younger women now, and you know, not even younger women now, but you know, over the past 20-25 years maybe, their experiences, they'll be missing out on that kind of 70s, 80s kind of environment that kind of give people of our kind of generation, I suppose, a different set of experiences to them. So there'll be a lot more, and men as well, you know, absolutely, you know, men are kind of far more in touch, I think, or kind of prepared to be vulnerable than they would have been in the past.
And I think men also now, the guys coming through now, sort of in their 30s, 40s and possibly in their 50s as well, are actually much more open to women being equals in business, and much more open to being equal. I'm not saying this very well. Much more open to female ideas, and not just going, she's an emotional woman, we don't have to listen to that. I think it's changing massively already, and I agree. I think everybody should be themselves, and I think everybody, as we've said on other pod chats, everybody views everything from their own perception. Like you've just said, it's your experience, your life. You know, the only bit of my body that is not on the organ donation is my eyes, because I don't want anybody else to see the world through my eyes. And I know that's stupid. But I see the world how I see it, and nobody else can. So they're not having my eyes.
Interesting.
Yeah. Just to diversify, as we always do. So I think it's very much down to the individual. But I think there are one or two of those organisations that still exist where there's a difference in male and female decision making.
quite possibly.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I mean, I don't experience it as such myself. I do look back and I look at me and my dad and the journey, the difference between from my granddad, my dad to me, if you like. And my dad is very much not Victorian, you know, in his ways, but you can tell he had a Victorian upbringing.
Yeah.
It was very much kind of drilled into him that this was the role of a man.
Yeah.
You know, this is what happened, and he kind of still, you know, being old codger that he is, he's still he acts that way.
Yeah.
He still very much acts that way, and
Yeah.
kind of operates with that as his kind of core guiding principle. You can't tell whether you would act with that principle because you don't know, you didn't have that experience, so you don't know how kind of profound that were an impact on your life as well. Whereas I know that kind of, you know, some of the experiences that I've had will absolutely have kind of shaped the way I feel about everything.
And what about your boys?
So my lads, I think they're probably more scared of their mum than they are of me. They're both the mums.
It's like a drive on road, single
That's
handed,
how
I think.
it should be.
Fair enough. That's
There's no kind of, you know, wait till your dad gets home kind of thing mentality, and never has been. My oldest son, I'm not with his mum anymore. She was a very kind of dominant character in kind of his upbringing, as you would expect, and she's kind of her kind of personality has definitely shaped the way that he looks at things. And same with Anne and our son. He's kind of got a lot of that as well. It's a very much a kind of a tool ball thing. You know, we kind of doing this as a partnership thing, and he's the product of kind of both of us, if you like. So you can see the things what he does like his mum. I can see the things that he does like me. Probably I can see them less. My nan can see them more.
But I'm guessing they have a total respect for girls their own age and women, and don't see that they are any different.
No, there's very much a kind of complete level playing field in that instance.
Yeah, and I do think it'll disappear more and more and more. Absolutely, I think. But like you say, there is the emotion versus logic, and I think men perceive, particularly, that women make emotional decisions, whereas men make logical decisions. And actually, it's on the individual.
absolutely.
It's just not that clear cut.
Yeah, I agree. And for years and years and years, whether you were a male or whether you're a female, there'd have been some sort of suppression going on in yourself that kind of said, well, this is how women act, this is how men act, and now you've got to the point whereby, oh no, this is how I act, and whatever that might be, that's where.
I think as well it can go on whatever's happening, so maybe it's an environmental decision as well.
Can be, yeah.
So
Well, Russ, that's the end of the pod chat.
Brilliant.
He actually.
I'm unaffected.
You are unaffected.
Damn! We might have to have him back at some point to try and affect him once
Yeah, we
again.
might not let him go yet.
Well, this is true, but because the recording's off and the camera's off doesn't mean he gets to leave. We will see you all next time.
we will see and hear whichever
Yeah.
platform you're listening on.
Yes, I forget about you over there.
So thanks Ross, thanks for coming in and
thanks for
sharing
having
your
us. It's been great.
insight.
We
Really
need
enjoyed
another
it.
brew.
That's always a brew on it, Make a Brew HQ. Always.
Tatty bye.
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 How was that?
Good.